We just had Thanksgiving not too long ago, and I don't know about you guys. I think we still have some leftover turkey in the fridge, and so Thanksgiving is still going on in a way. It keeps happening. For Christmas Day, there's kind of a traditional Christmas feast, and a lot of families will have a Christmas ham, or if they want to go really old school traditional, they'll do a Christmas goose. I've never had a Christmas goose, but turkeys, ham, those kind of things. But eating becomes a major part of the celebration of the holiday. And Jesus often uses illustrations in the scripture about things that we can relate to like that, like food. He uses food to teach us in a lot of different ways. And this morning, we're going to look at in Luke chapter 14. Jesus uses a particular kind of food to help illustrate what he's teaching about following God with your whole heart. If you open your Bible to Luke chapter 14, Jesus makes a statement that your doctor may disagree with. He says, salt is good. Now, even the doctor recognizes you need a certain amount of salt in your diet. I think part of the problem that the doctors have with it is that we tend to have even more salt in our diets than we actually need. But back in the ancient times, it was more difficult to get salt. Today, salt is pretty cheap. You can get a little salt shaker for your table at the dollar store, and it'll last quite a while. A little bit of salt goes a long way, and we don't really feel the effects of salt deficiency in our culture. But in ancient times, salt was much more difficult to obtain. It took a lot more physical work. They would mine it out of the ground, or they would have to collect seawater and evaporate it and try and somehow get a way to gather enough salt that you could use. As a matter of fact, you've heard the word salary for payment. What you get for working. Well, the root word of that has to do with salt. And the reason is because in ancient times, the Roman soldiers and others were often paid for their work in salt. And salt was, at one time at least, per pound, it cost the same as gold. So salt was a pretty precious thing. In fact, today, we know that a lot of animals don't get enough salt in their diets. And so if you happen to get yourself one of those big old blocks of salt, you might set it out in the backyard. You might have deer come by and start licking on it, or if you have livestock, they may be licking on this salt block. Why would they bother to do that? It's because they tend to need salt in their bodies. Our bodies need this sodium chloride that we call table salt, and it's an essential nutrient to our bodies. Without it, we would not function. So Jesus says salt is good. And he's not talking about an overabundance of salt. He's talking about the fact that it's something that's necessary. Salt is good. We like the flavor of it. Matter of fact, the more salt deficient you get, the more you like the flavor of salt. So a lot of times, for instance, when a woman is pregnant, sometimes she'll want lots more salt than she normally does because she's having to salt for two here, and so our bodies are designed to need salt, and because of that need, God built into us a desire a craving for salt, a desire for salt. We like salty foods typically. Not everybody. Gina doesn't like salty foods much, and once in a while she'll want something salty. But I tend to, if I'm going to eat a peanut, I want one that's fully salted. Don't give me the lightly salted. Don't give me the unsalted. I'm eating the peanut to hold the salt. That's basically. Jesus said salt is good, but if the salt has lost its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? Now this is a weird question for a number of reasons. First of all, has anybody ever had table salt stop tasting salty? I have. Scientists tell us that sodium chloride, the mineral that we call salt, is a very stable element and doesn't really lose its saltiness. It doesn't expire. It doesn't go bad. They say if you have an expiration date on your Morton salt that you buy at the store, it's because the iodine in it, because it's iodized salt. They add something to it, and can go bad, but the sodium chloride really doesn't go bad. Now, interestingly, in the ancient world, if they mined their salt out of salt mines near the Dead Sea or something along those lines, you would get something that is not exactly pure salt. It would have a number of other minerals mixed in with it. And so the idea of salt becoming unsalty, it really can only happen if the salt wasn't pure to begin with. If there's some impurity that allows the actual sodium chloride to leach out of it. So maybe you get another mineral that's mixed in with it, and then it gets moist and gets wet, and the sodium chloride kind of leaches out. All of a sudden you have stuff that looks like salt, but it's no longer salty. It doesn't have that essential element in it that you're looking for. So Jesus said, if the salt has lost its flavor, so what he's doing here is he's either presenting an impossible scenario for us to think about the ramifications of what would happen if salt could lose its flavor, or he's referring to a situation where the salt wasn't purely salt in the first place, and what you're ending up with is something that looks like salt, but it's not salty. But he plays out this scenario, he said, and his question is this: if the salt loses its flavor, what will it be made salty with? How are you going to salt your salt? And it always seemed to me like there wasn't a lot of context for what Jesus is saying here. It seems to be a really short question. It seems to be kind of absurdly hypothetical. Where is he going with this thought? Well, he's actually speaking in a context. And if you're reading along in your Bible, you'll notice that sometimes there'll be a little subheading above some of the verses that'll kind of tell you what that section is about. But in the original, it didn't have that subheading. And this verse 14 is just a continuation of a conversation that started way back in verse 25. I'm sorry, verse 34 is a continuation of what started in verse 25. So let's take a quick look back there and review what Jesus was talking about and see if we can understand what does he mean about salt that becomes unsalty. Now he says, now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. What Jesus is talking about here, the context, he's talking about an all-or-nothing approach to serving and following God. If you want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, in other words, if you want to be a person who is following him, who wants to not just learn about him, not just imitate certain things about Jesus, but if you want to pattern your life after Jesus, you've got to be all in. Or it really doesn't count. It doesn't do anything. But what you're doing, Jesus had a lot of people who would follow and listen as long as he was doing miracles and teaching cool stuff. But then when he said something they didn't like, they left. Jesus had a huge multitude. When he fed the 5,000, and he feeds all these thousands of people with a little bit of bread and fish, and they were amazed. They loved it. They all wanted to hear what he had to say. And then he tells them something about the fact that he is the bread of life. And the fact that if they don't, he uses this metaphor of them eating him. And you need Jesus. It's basically what he's saying. I don't want to just be here to give you food. I am your food. I am what you need. he's talking about disciples, if he's talking about people who are sold out for Jesus and seeking after him first and foremost in their lives, what could he mean when he talks about salt losing its saltiness? Well, there's another passage we can cross-reference. You don't have to turn there because it basically sounds the same as this verse, only he adds one little thing. In Matthew 5:13, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." And then he says, if the salt has lost its saltiness, what will it be made salty? So what Jesus is talking about here is he's talking about you. If you're a disciple of Jesus Christ, if you are a person who has decided, I'm going to follow Jesus, and I don't care about the rest of the world, and if it means conflict with the people that I love and care about, if it means walking away from houses and land and jobs and everything else, if it means I have to give up everything else in my life, I want Jesus and I want him alone. If that's what you're talking about, you are the salt of the earth. Now, salt really just does one thing. It's just salty. I mean, it has different functions. It can be used as a preservative. It can be used just to flavor your food because your body needs it, so you crave it, so you like having salt on things. But salt's whole job is to be salty. I mean, a little salt shaker can look decorative on your table, but that doesn't do much. If you go to shake it out and there's no flavor from it, you keep shaking and shaking and you get this little white powder that doesn't taste like anything, that's not useful. And what Jesus is saying is that salt that's not salty is worthless. I mean, if you had, let's imagine for a moment that you've got a container of salt in your cupboard, and you discover that for whatever reason, maybe it was had some other mineral in it or something. Anyway, for whatever reason, you've discovered that it's no longer salty. You can't use it for canning. You can't use it for flavoring your food. It's just this sort of white granulated substance in your cupboard that doesn't have any saltiness to it. Are you going to waste good salt to try and mix with it, to try and get it to be salty again? No. That would be silly. Because that stuff that's its only job. That's all it's for. And if it won't do that, it has no longer any use. And this is where Jesus goes with this thought. The hypothetical question was, what are you going to salt your salt with if it gets unsalty? And what he's saying is, how are we going to make disciples in the world? How are people going to bring others to Jesus if you, the disciples, the ones that are supposed to be telling people about me, the ones that are supposed to be leading people to God, the ones that are supposed to be demonstrating my words in action, if they're not doing that, who's going to do it? Jesus says in verse 35, it is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill. You can't even use it for your manure pile. It's not good for anything. He says it's neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. What Jesus is calling us to is not a hobby. He's not saying add Christianity to your life a couple of days a week and it's just going to make your life so much better. It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to help you feel more fulfilled. You'll be a better person. It might even improve your health. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's not saying, come to me and I'll make your job better. I'll make your family relationship stronger. I'll make your people that work with you, I'll make them like you more. I'll make the crowds enjoy you. That's not what he's saying either. He's saying, come to me and bring a cross with you. Because it's going to be rough. But this is what he's created you for. This is his purpose for your life and for mine, is to shine for him in a dark place. It's to be the flavor in this world that is without the disciples of Jesus Christ on this earth, that flavor would be missing completely. Because that's how Jesus lets his word be seen who are committed to Him. And oftentimes, that flavor is not so noticeable when things are easy. It's usually easier to notice when things are tough. Back in Matthew, Jesus also, he tags on to this idea of salt. He also talks about light. He talks about us being the light of the world. You know, the darker it is in the room, the brighter that light appears. Sometimes God calls us through some very difficult things. It could be health problems. It could be the loss of family members. It could be raising grandchildren. Some of these things are very, very difficult and often very painful. But if that's what God is calling you to, and that's what He's placed before you, that's what He's given you to do, then when you just go for it, and you do what He's asked you to, not because it's going to make your life better, but because you're going to be honoring Him. You are flavoring the world. You're giving the people around you a taste of heaven in your life. You're giving them the opportunity to know what God is like when He walks around on earth, because He lives in you. This is what Jesus is calling people to, is to a life of discipleship, a life of being truly spiritually salty. We shouldn't be ashamed of that. We shouldn't try to hide it. He's asking us to go all out. One mark of a good leader is that they won't ask you to do anything they wouldn't do. What did Jesus do for us? Could Jesus have accomplished His purposes some other way? Maybe. Maybe He could have just decided that man's sins would be paid for by. Maybe He could have created, I don't know, maybe created an animal sacrifice that would actually take away sin. I don't know how that would have worked. Obviously, He does say, if there's any other way, let this cup pass. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. But what Jesus did was He came and He lived among us. And that's what we're celebrating on Christmas Day, is that the God of the whole universe, the one who created it all, spoke it into existence, and who holds it all together in His hands. That God came down to become one of us. And He gave the world a taste of heaven when they saw Him. They saw how He treated the blind and the beggars. They saw how He treated the harlots and the prostitutes and the tax collectors that nobody wanted to be around, and the criminals. They saw how He treated the religious people who thought they were hot stuff, and He often brought them down in front of the crowd. But they saw how Jesus interacted in human flesh. They got a taste of heaven in Him. And He's called you and I to join Him in His work. He's not just sitting up in heaven saying, you guys need to do better. He came down here and said, here's how it's done. Join me. Do this with me. And as He sends us out into the world as salt, to flavor the world around us, He's not sending us alone. He's within you. A fully committed disciple of Jesus Christ is of great value to the world. They may not know it, but they need it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank You for making us instruments of Your work, for letting us enter into what You're doing, and for allowing us to give the world a taste of heaven through our lives. We pray that You would help us to be truly and completely sold out for You, and that pleasing and honoring You would be the greatest and the strongest drive in our lives. We ask this in